My name is Corinne Adler, 34, founder of a creative media studio in Portland. People call me Steady, the kind of woman who never raises her voice, who keeps her promises even when no one else remembers them. I used to think that calm made me strong. Lately, it just makes me quiet. This afternoon, I'm sitting in a glass-walled office at the Porsche dealership, signing the final line on a stack of papers. The sales manager slides a set of keys across the table with a practiced smile. "Congratulations," he says. His voice bounces in the sterile air like applause I can't feel. I murmur thanks, take the keys, and step out into the gray Oregon light. The car gleams in the drizzle, a metallic gray Porsche Taycan, smooth and understated. More promise than spectacle. I take one photo on my phone, the reflection of my umbrella faint in the wet hood. Caption dreams realized. Then I put the phone away. Back in my apartment. I drop the keys on the counter and kick off my heels. The rain against the window sounds like static. My phone buzzes once, then again. The screen lights up with a name I haven't seen in years, Mom calling. For a moment, I can't move. It's been 5 years since my parents skipped my engagement dinner. Logan's firm has an event that night. Mom had said like she was canceling a lunch date. I'd told myself that silence was easier than another rejection. Now, her voice cuts through the line, smooth and certain. We need to talk. Family meeting tomorrow, 2 o'clock. No greeting, no apology, just instruction. Like old times. I look at the car keys glinting under the kitchen light. The silence between us has lasted half a decade. Now it hums with something new. Sure, I say quietly. Let's talk. 2 weeks before the engagement party, Ethan and I drove to Cannon Beach. The sky was the color of pewter, and the wind whipped cold across the sand. I remember laughing as my hair stuck to the rain on my face. Ethan dropped to one knee without ceremony. No audience, no photographer. Just the tide rolling in. He opened a small box, the diamond catching what little light was left in the day. "You've built your whole world," he said softly. "Let me be part of it." I said yes before he could even finish. We stood there, soaked and shivering, but radiant. I took a photo of the ring glinting against the gray ocean and sent it to my parents, my hands still trembling. The message read, "He proposed. I can't wait for you to meet him." Then I waited for minutes, then hours, then days. The reply never came. On the night of our engagement dinner, the restaurant glowed with candlelight. Ethan's parents toasted to our future, his mother beaming, his father clapping him on the shoulder. I kept my phone on the table, screen facing up, convinced that at any second my parents would call, or text, or send something that sounded like love. When the last guests left and the candles burned low, I checked one last time. There it was, a single thumbs-up emoji from Mom on a family thread with Logan's name above it. Not a message, not even acknowledgement, just an accident, an echo from the wrong conversation. I stared at that small icon until it blurred, realizing how familiar the feeling was. As a child, I had watched my brother's trophies line the mantel, polished and proud, while my art ribbons curled in a drawer. Dad's voice had carried from the kitchen once, "You're self-sufficient." Sweetheart, he needs more from us. I'd mistaken that sentence for praise. Now, I understood it for what it was, a quiet erasure that started long before the ring. 3 years passed quietly, measured not by holidays or birthdays, but by deadlines and growth charts. What began as a desk in my living room became Adler Motion, a creative studio with 20 employees and a steady hum of ambition. Our office overlooked the Willamette River, where the light in late afternoon turned everything the color of brass. Clients started calling me the woman who builds from nothing. I didn't correct them. Success had its own rhythm: early mornings, long hours, the steady layering of progress over loneliness. I hired people who worked the way I did, with focus, with care, with something to prove, but no one to prove it to. We built campaigns for nonprofits that supported women in tech, stories about underfunded dreams and overlooked talent. I never had to explain why those projects mattered. My team understood. Naomi Blake, my mentor and first investor, stopped by once a month for coffee and quiet warnings. She was in her 60s, sharp as winter glass. Success doesn't heal old wounds. She told me once, stirring sugar into her espresso, it just gives you better lighting to see them. I laughed, but I knew she was right. Every milestone made their absence brighter. My parents still didn't call. No congratulations when I appeared in Portland Business Journal. No text when I moved into my first office downtown. I refused their offers of a small family loan years ago and funded our employee health plan myself. Each signature, each contract, became proof of something they'd never recognize I had learned to stand without applause. Late one night, after a successful pitch to a national client, I lingered in the darkened office. The glass walls reflected my own outline. Tired, proud, still searching for someone who wasn't there. Outside, the city glowed faintly in drizzle. A mirror of the night Ethan proposed. I pressed a hand to the window, feeling the pulse of rain against my skin. I did this. I whispered into the quiet, even if they'll never care. It was a Friday afternoon when I took the Porsche out for its first real drive. The dealership plates were still on, the metallic gray surface catching the kind of Portland sunlight that disappears within minutes. I eased onto the highway, the hum of the engine more satisfying than I'd imagined. No music, no calls, just the clean sound of movement quiet. Deliberate, earned. The car cost $130,000, paid in full. It wasn't impulse or vanity. It was punctuation, a full stop at the end of a long sentence I'd written myself. Back home. I parked it in the driveway and stood for a while, the scent of rain rising from the asphalt. I took one photo, the car half shadowed by clouds. Nothing posed or polished. The caption was 2 words, dreams realized. I closed the app and didn't think about it again. 3 days later, my phone started buzzing nonstop. Mentions, messages, distant relatives remembering my name. Then a text from my cousin Drew. Your mom just shared your photo, said you're doing well. The words looked almost kind, but I could already hear the conversation behind them, her pride threaded with calculation. That evening, while I reviewed campaign edits with my team, my phone rang. Mom. For a heartbeat. I considered ignoring it. Then I picked up. Her voice carried that same blend of authority and discomfort. We need to talk. Family meeting tomorrow, 2 o'clock. Your father says it's important. I felt the corner of my mouth lift, not in amusement but recognition. 5 years of silence. And now an emergency at exactly the moment my success was visible. I murmured something polite and hung up. When Ethan came home, I was still standing by the window, the Porsche reflecting the last trace of daylight. He kissed my temple and read the look on my face before I said a word. Remember who you are, he said quietly. Extraction team on standby. I laughed, but only softly. I wasn't the same woman who once waited for an apology that never came. This time, I wasn't walking into that house unarmed. The drive to my parents' house took 40 minutes, long enough to remember every version of myself that used to make this trip dutiful daughter, hopeful peacemaker, silent disappointment. The closer I got, the more the past seemed to press against the windshield. Their colonial house looked unchanged, its white shutters freshly painted, the hydrangeas in perfect bloom. From the outside, it was still the picture of success. Inside, the air smelled of lemon polish and old control. Mom opened the door with a quick, nervous smile that didn't reach her eyes. Dad was already seated in the dining room, papers spread across the table. Logan sat beside him, tie loosened, expression rehearsed. His wife, Hannah, offered a thin smile and gestured toward an empty chair across from them. On the polished wood between us lay the evidence spreadsheets, printed emails, color-coded tabs, mortgage arrears, private school tuition, unpaid property taxes. One word underlined twice in red: foreclosure. Dad cleared his throat. We thought you might want to help. Family supports family. Mom's tone softened, almost pleading. Think of your nieces, Corinne. They shouldn't have to suffer. For a moment, I just looked at them, the same people who hadn't been at my wedding, my milestones, My company's launch. My hands stayed steady on my purse strap, the leather cool under my fingers. Where were you? I asked quietly. When I needed family? Logan scoffed, leaning back. You always had to prove something, always needed to make a statement. I met his eyes. And what have you proven? Exactly. He flinched but said nothing. Dad shifted the papers toward me, as if proximity could convince. It's just a temporary situation. A small loan, maybe a few $100,000. You're doing so well now it's your turn to step up. Mom's hand brushed his arm. Don't make it sound like an obligation. Then, to me, it's an opportunity to help. That's what family does. Their voices tangled in practiced guilt, the kind that had always worked before. But something in me stayed still, almost calm. I glanced at the papers one more time, at the careful signatures and desperate margins. Then I exhaled, the truth settling like dust in the air. So that's what this really was, not reconciliation, not love, just proof. Proof that I had finally built enough to be useful again. The silence stretched long enough for me to hear the faint tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway. The same sound that once marked curfews and lectures now filled the room like background noise to a performance I'd already memorized. I reached into my bag, unlatched a leather briefcase, and set it gently on the table. The click of the clasp broke the tension more cleanly than words could. This, I said, sliding a stack of crisp papers across the polished wood, is the charter for the Rivera Media Scholarship Foundation. It's fully funded $16 million from the sale of my company. Dad blinked, confusion crossing his face before it hardened into disbelief. Mom leaned forward, eyes narrowing at the formal letterhead. Logan picked up one page, scanning it like it might reveal hidden zeros that could be redirected his way. It's for young women in digital media. I continued, my voice steady. Girls who were overlooked, like I was. The first round of applications opens next month. Dad's mouth twitched. You could have given that to family, he said. Each word clipped. The tone caught somewhere between accusation and entitlement. I met his gaze. I did. Just not the kind that shares my last name. Logan's face flushed deep red. You're unbelievable. You'd rather throw money at strangers than help your own blood. I reached for my phone and placed it on the table beside the documents. The red light on the recording app pulsed faintly. This meeting's documented, I said quietly. Just in case anyone forgets the difference between family and leverage? Mom drew in a breath like she might protest, but no sound came out. Hannah looked down at her hands, her ring glinting under the chandelier. I gathered the papers back into the briefcase, each motion slow and deliberate. My money has a purpose, I said. Standing. You had your chance. For a moment, no one moved. The only sound was the steady hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen, the mundane heartbeat of a house built on pretense. Then I turned toward the door, the click of my heels marking the end of something unspoken. Outside, the afternoon light was thin and cold. I walked to the Porsche without looking back. By midnight, my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Missed calls, texts, voicemails, each one another variation of guilt, panic, or anger. Mom's voice first, trembling and urgent. You've humiliated your brother. Then Dad's. This isn't how family behaves. Logan's came last, slurred with rage. You'll regret this. Corinne, we're blood. I let the phone fall silent on the kitchen counter. The rain outside softened the city into static. The next morning at Adler Motion, my assistant Janine stopped by my office door. There's a situation downstairs. Through the glass lobby, I saw my parents at the reception desk, Dad's voice rising above the hum of clients and staff. We demand to speak with her, he said, pounding his palm against the counter. She owes us an explanation. Mom stood beside him, shaking, her composure unraveling with every word. Security handled it quickly, ushering them outside with firm but gentle hands. My team pretended not to stare. When the doors finally closed, the silence left behind felt both heavy and clean. Later that day, Naomi called. Her voice, as always, was calm and precise. "Boundaries are love in their adult form," she said. "Don't confuse guilt with compassion. You're doing what they should have done long ago. Protect what you've built." That evening, the Portland Chronicle published an article about the Rivera Foundation local entrepreneur turns success into opportunity for women in media. The photo showed me standing beside Naomi and our first advisory board, smiling against the backdrop of the city. Comments flooded in support, admiration, gratitude, and then, almost inevitably, another headline surfaced: law firm partner Logan Adler faces foreclosure and debt inquiry. The story spread fast. The same relatives who once ignored me now forwarding links with quiet fascination. I opened my laptop and drafted a single email addressed to my family. "All communication regarding personal matters must go through my attorney. Do not contact me directly." When I pressed send, I expected relief to come like a rush of air. Instead, it arrived slowly, like light filling a long-closed room. For the first time in years, the silence wasn't punishment, it was peace. It was almost spring when the message arrived. Mom's text was short, formal, as if she were writing to a stranger. "Your father and I would like to meet for coffee. Just to talk." I stared at it for a long time before replying with a single word. "Sure." We met at a small cafe near the river. Neutral ground. They looked older, somehow smaller, their practiced confidence replaced by the quiet unease of people who'd run out of scripts. Dad stood when I approached, an awkward half-smile tugging at his face. Mom reached for my hand but stopped halfway, unsure if she still had permission. The conversation began stiffly weather, work, nothing of substance. Then, after a pause, Dad cleared his throat. "We should have been there," he said. The words sounded rehearsed but sincere enough to sting. I nodded once. "You should have." My voice stayed even. I'd imagined this moment for years and expected it to feel heavier. Instead, it was light, almost calm. "If you want contact," I added, "start therapy. Together. Then we can talk about what's next." Mom looked startled, her lips parting in quiet protest. Dad frowned, the old reflex flickering control trying to resurface, but he said nothing. The silence that followed was the most honest sound between us in decades. Outside, drizzle misted the air, soft and clean. We stepped onto the sidewalk together, the three of us standing like acquaintances who'd shared a long flight. I gave them a polite nod and walked toward the parking lot. When I reached my car, my phone buzzed. A message from Naomi Maya Harrison's scholarship has been approved. I opened the attachment, a photo of a 17-year-old filmmaker holding a camera too big for her hands, eyes fierce with quiet determination. "Maya," I murmured to myself, smiling. "That's where my family energy goes now." I started the car and pulled into the slow rhythm of Portland traffic, the rain painting the windshield in silver streaks. The world outside felt new, not because they'd changed, but because I finally had. The Foundation's studio sat in an old warehouse near the waterfront, its walls lined with framed stills from student films. Afternoon light poured through the high windows, catching dust in thin, golden threads. I stood behind Maya Harrison, watching her edit a short film on the monitor, a documentary about women who had learned to speak after years of silence. Her focus was absolute, her fingers moving with the kind of confidence that doesn't come from being told you're good, but from deciding you are. "Cut 2 seconds earlier," I suggested quietly. She nodded, adjusting the timeline. The image of an older woman looking straight into the camera froze on screen strong, unblinking, free. I felt something shift in my chest. Maya reminded me of myself at 17, determined, unseen, building her worth from scraps of encouragement. Except she didn't flinch under doubt. Maybe that was the difference a hand on your shoulder could make. Ethan appeared in the doorway, holding 2 coffees. "You've replaced therapy with mentorship," he teased, handing me a cup. His smile reached his eyes, the same steady warmth that had carried me through every fracture. Maybe this is what healing looks like, I said, watching Maya color correct a frame, making sure someone else doesn't wait as long as I did. He leaned against the doorframe, quietly proud. Then you're doing more good than you realize. When he left, I turned back to my desk, a stack of scholarship applications waiting for review stories of young creators from small towns, single-parent homes, places that didn't have room for dreams like theirs. As I read, I realized I wasn't just funding opportunities. I was building the community I once needed, a world where women didn't have to earn permission to be seen. Outside, the city lights flickered on one by one, and the studio hummed with the soft rhythm of creation. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was chasing validation. I was giving it shape. A year later, I stood on the stage of the Portland Arts Center, the lights warm against my face. The plaque in my hand felt heavier than I expected. Leadership in Creative Philanthropy, engraved in clean silver letters. Below the stage, every seat was full. My team sat together in the front row, next to Naomi, Ethan, and the first scholarship recipients of the Rivera Foundation. Their faces glowed with pride that had nothing to do with obligation. The host handed me the microphone, and for a moment, I simply looked at them, the people who had shown up. I thought of the empty chairs that had once followed me through my life like shadows, and how none of them were empty now. I used to measure love by what I gave, I said, my voice steady. Now I measure it by what I keep, the peace I fought for, the people who stayed, and the purpose that outlasted everything else. Applause rose like a wave, warm and real. When the ceremony ended, Ethan slipped his arm around my shoulders, and we walked out into the cool night air. The city smelled of rain and new beginnings. On the drive home, the Porsche hummed beneath us, the same car that had once started all of this. At a red light near the park, I caught a glimpse of two familiar figures walking on the sidewalk, my parents, side by side, their steps slow, their faces softened by time. Our eyes met for a moment through the glass. No anger, no apology, just history. Finally quiet. The light turned green, and I pressed the accelerator gently. The engine purred, steady and earned, carrying me forward into a life that finally felt like mine.